The morning of my graduation, I woke up to a house that felt wrong. Not wrong like something was broken or out of place. Wrong like the air itself had shifted overnight. I lay in bed for a few minutes listening to the sounds downstairs, my stepmother's heels clicking across the kitchen tile, the low murmur of my father's voice, my stepsister laughing at something on her phone. Normal sounds. Except nothing about that morning was normal, and somewhere in the back of my chest I already knew it. I was 23 years old, first in my family to finish a 4-year degree. I'd worked 2 part-time jobs through college, kept a 3.8 GPA, and driven myself to every single class in a 15-year-old Civic that smelled like fast food wrappers and determination. My father had promised. Not once, not twice, but every holiday dinner for 4 years, that when I graduated, he would sign over the property on Clearwater Road to me. It was a small rental house that had belonged to my grandfather. Nothing fancy. 3 bedrooms, a chain-link fence in the back, a porch that sagged a little on the left side. But it was paid off, it was worth something, and my grandfather had left it to my father with the specific instruction that it go to his first grandchild upon completing college. That grandchild was me. I had the letter. My grandfather had given me a copy before he passed, a handwritten note tucked inside a birthday card he mailed me the summer before he died. He wrote that he was proud of me, that he knew I'd finish what I started, and that the house on Clearwater Road was my foundation. Your father knows, he wrote. It's all taken care of. I believed him. I believed my father. I had no reason not to. I showered, pressed my graduation gown, and came downstairs to find my father and stepmother sitting at the kitchen table with a folder between them. My stepsister was standing at the counter eating a yogurt, not looking at me. My father had a coffee cup in both hands the way he does when he's nervous. My stepmother looked up when I walked in and gave me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Morning," I said. "Morning, sweetheart." My father's voice was too careful, like he'd rehearsed it. I looked at the folder. "What's that?" He cleared his throat. "We need to talk to you about the Clearwater property." I pulled out a chair and sat down. My heart was already doing something strange. "Okay." My stepmother opened the folder before my father could. Of course she did. She had been doing that for the last 7 years, opening things, deciding things, speaking before he could find his words. She slid a document across the table toward me. Clean, typed, official-looking. "We've had the property reassessed," she said. "And given everything, the market, the cost of upkeep, the tax situation, we've decided it makes more financial sense for the house to go to your stepsister. She's starting her business this year. She needs the capital." I stared at the paper. Then I looked at my father. He was looking at his coffee. "Dad," my voice came out very flat, "you promised me that house." "Honey, Grandpa left that house for me. You know that. I have the letter." My stepmother made a small dismissive sound. "A handwritten note isn't a legal document. The deed is in your father's name. He can do what he likes with it." "She's right," my stepsister said from the counter without looking up from her yogurt. "Sorry." She didn't sound sorry. I sat there for 3 seconds, maybe 4. I thought about raising my voice. I thought about crying. I thought about the 4 years I'd worked open to close at the coffee shop on weekends so I wouldn't have to ask my father for money, the way I'd said no to every spring break trip and every birthday dinner out so I could save. I thought about how I had never, not once, asked this family for anything. And I thought about how they had just looked me in the face on my graduation morning and told me that none of that mattered. I didn't say any of that. I stood up, pushed the chair back in neatly, and said, "I need to make a phone call." I went upstairs, closed my bedroom door, and sat on the edge of my bed. Then I called my grandfather's attorney. His name was on the letter, a firm downtown that my grandfather had used for 30 years. I had looked them up before, out of curiosity, and never deleted the number. I found it in my contacts and pressed call, and when the receptionist answered, I told her my name and my grandfather's name, and that I had a question about an estate matter. She put me on hold for 2 minutes. Then a man's voice came on, calm and unhurried, and asked how he could help. I told him everything, the letter, the promise, the document downstairs, what my stepmother had said about handwritten notes. He was quiet for a moment. "Miss," he said, "your grandfather did more than write you a letter." He explained it to me slowly and clearly, the way you explain something to someone who needs to hear every word. 3 years before he died, my grandfather had updated his estate documents with a trust provision. The Clearwater Road property had been placed into irrevocable trusts with me named as the sole beneficiary. When he passed, the trust became irrevocable. The deed had technically transferred to my father as trustee, but only as trustee, not as owner. He had no legal right to sell it, gift it, or transfer it to anyone else. If he had attempted to do so, it would have been a breach of fiduciary duty. "Has he signed anything?" the attorney asked. "I don't know," I said. "They put a document in front of me this morning. I don't think I was supposed to sign it. I think they were telling me." "Don't sign anything," he said. "I'll pull the trust documents today. Can you come in Monday?" I said yes. I thanked him. I hung up. I sat on my bed for a moment in the quiet of my room, looking at my graduation gown laid out across the chair. Outside, I could hear my stepmother's heels again, and the low sound of the television, and my stepsister's laugh. I thought about going back downstairs and telling them what I'd just learned. I decided not to. Not yet. I went to my graduation ceremony. I walked across the stage and shook the dean's hand and smiled for the photographs. My father was there in the audience. My stepmother and stepsister had stayed home, claiming they weren't feeling well, which told me everything I needed to know about how confident they felt. He hugged me afterward and said he was proud of me, and I let him, because whatever was happening legally had nothing to do with whether I loved my father. I just didn't trust him anymore. Those are two different things, and that morning, I had finally learned to separate them. On Monday, I sat across from my grandfather's attorney in a small conference room with a window that looked out over a parking garage. He had the trust documents printed out and organized into a clear folder. He walked me through every page. The trust was airtight. My grandfather had been specific, thorough, and apparently anticipatory of exactly this kind of situation, because there was a clause, one single paragraph near the end, that stated if the trustee attempted to redirect or reassign the property to any party other than the named beneficiary, the trustee would be removed and a successor trustee appointed automatically. "Your father didn't just make a promise," the attorney said. "He accepted a legal obligation when he accepted the role of trustee. He may not have fully understood what he was agreeing to, or he may have been convinced by someone that it wouldn't matter. Either way, the trust supersedes anything he signed or said to your stepmother." "Can I remove him as trustee?" I asked. Given his stated intention to breach the trust, yes, you can petition the court. It's not complicated. This is a straightforward case. But before we go that route, I'd like to send him a formal notice. Sometimes a letter from an attorney is enough. I said to send the letter. It went out that Wednesday. By Thursday afternoon, my father was calling me. I let it go to voicemail 3 times before I picked up. He sounded different than he had on graduation morning. Less rehearsed, more like himself. "I didn't know," he said, "about the trust. She told me the letter was just sentimental, that it didn't have any legal standing. I thought." "You thought it was fine," I said, "because she told you it was fine." He was quiet. "Dad, she was wrong, and you didn't ask me. You didn't call the attorney. You let her put that paper on the table and tell me on my graduation morning that Grandpa's house was going to her daughter." "I know." "Did you know that you're the trustee, that Grandpa set up a whole trust?" "I knew there was a trust. I didn't read it. She said she'd handled it." That sentence landed somewhere painful. She said she'd handled it. I thought about my grandfather sitting down with his attorney 3 years before he died, making sure everything was written down correctly, making sure I would be protected. And then I thought about my father handing that protection over to a woman who had no reason to honor it. "The attorney is going to file a petition to have you removed as trustee," I said, "unless you agree to honor the trust voluntarily. Those are the options." Another long pause. "I'll sign whatever you need," he said quietly. "I'm sorry, honey. I'm really sorry." My stepmother did not take it quietly. When my father told her that evening, she called me herself, twice, within an hour. I didn't answer. She left one voicemail telling me I was being dramatic, and another telling me that the trust was probably fraudulent, and she was going to have her own attorney look at it. I forwarded both messages to my grandfather's attorney, who noted them in the file and said, cheerfully, that we were happy to see them in court if that's what she preferred. She did not call back after that. 3 weeks later, my father signed the paperwork, voluntarily transferring his trustee duties and acknowledging my ownership of the property. I stood in the attorney's office and watched him sign his name, and I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt tired and a little sad, and also very clear about something I hadn't been clear about before, that my grandfather had known, on some level, that this might happen. He had seen something in my father, not malice, but weakness, and he had built a wall around me before I knew I needed one. I drove out to Clearwater Road that afternoon. The house looked the same as it always had. Small, square, a little worn, with the sagging left side of the porch, and the chain-link fence and a big oak tree in the front yard that had been there since before I was born. The current tenants had a welcome mat that said "Home Sweet Home" and a ceramic frog by the front steps. I sat in my car in front of it for a while and didn't go up to the door because it wasn't the right time for that. I just looked at it. My grandfather had bought this house in 1987 with money he saved over 10 years working at a machine shop. He had rented it out for decades and never sold it, even when the market was good and people told him to cash out. He kept it, and then he left it to me. I thought about what it meant to leave someone a house. Not the money, not the square footage, not the rental income, the actual thing of it, the weight and the permanence and the message underneath, you will have somewhere to stand. Whatever happens, you will have somewhere to stand. I drove home. In the months that followed, things shifted in ways I hadn't fully anticipated. My father and I found a careful new shape for our relationship. Phone calls on Sundays, dinner every few weeks, conversations that stayed in certain lanes and avoided others. It wasn't what we'd had before, but what we'd had before had been built on me not knowing certain things, so in a way this was more honest. He never brought up my stepmother's name in my presence, which I took to mean that things at home were difficult. I didn't ask. My stepsister texted me once, about 2 months later. It said, "I want you to know I didn't know about the trust either." She told me it was handled. I read it 3 times and then replied, "I know. I hope things are okay." She sent back a single heart emoji, and I haven't heard from her since. My stepmother never apologized. I didn't expect her to. I found a property management company to handle the Clearwater Road tenants, and I set up a separate account for the rental income. The first month it came in, not a lot, but steady, reliable. I sat at my kitchen table and looked at the number and thought about my grandfather at his drafting table in his little house, updating his estate documents, choosing every word carefully. I thought about the attorney saying, "Your grandfather did more than write you a letter." He did more than write me a letter. He looked at the world clearly, saw where the soft spots were, and built me a foundation out of paperwork and foresight and the particular kind of love that doesn't announce itself. The kind that shows up years later when you need it, in the form of something solid under your feet. I finished my graduation thank you notes that same evening. I wrote my father's last, and it was short, and I meant every word of it. "Thank you for coming." It meant a lot to see you there. Because it did. Even now, even after everything, it did. Some things you hold together even when they're broken. You just have to know which parts to hold and which parts to finally let go. I keep thinking about my grandfather sitting at a desk somewhere, years before I ever needed him to, choosing every word in those trust documents carefully. He wasn't a man who talked much about love. He showed it in other ways. In the way he kept that house for decades when everyone told him to sell, and the way he called his attorney and made sure nothing could be undone without a paper trail. He saw something coming that I didn't, and he prepared for it anyway. That's the thing I've had to sit with, not the anger at my stepmother. That faded faster than I expected. Not even the grief about my father, which is slower and more complicated and probably never fully goes away. What I keep coming back to is the question of what it means to do the right thing when it's inconvenient. My grandfather could have done what was easy. He could have left everything loose and verbal and trusted people to behave well. He didn't. He was honest about human nature, including, gently, his own sons, and he acted accordingly. That kind of integrity doesn't announce itself. It just shows up when you need it. I think about the years I spent not asking for anything. 2 jobs, a 15-year-old car, every birthday dinner I skipped to stay on budget. At the time, I told myself it was just practicality. Looking back, I think some part of me believed that if I never needed anything, no one could take anything from me. That's not strength. That's fear wearing the costume of independence. Real strength is knowing what you're owed, understanding the systems that protect it, and being willing to pick up the phone. It's the willingness to understand how things actually work, not how you wish they worked, and to use that knowledge clearly, without cruelty, but without apology either. And then there's the part that was hardest to learn, that staying in the room when everything in you wants to leave is its own kind of courage. I could have walked away from my father entirely. Part of me wanted to, but I've watched other people burn every bridge in a moment of justified anger and spend years standing on the wrong side of a river. I chose to rebuild something smaller and more honest instead. That takes a different kind of endurance than the kind you need to survive the hard moment. It's the long kind, the kind that doesn't look like anything from the outside. My grandfather left me a house, but I think what he actually left me was a model for how to move through the world. With enough integrity to do the hard paperwork, enough clarity to understand what's real, and enough patience to play a long game in a world that rewards people who do. The rental income comes in on the first of every month now. I look at it every time and think about him. I think about the oak tree in the front yard that was there before I was born and will be there after I'm gone. Some things outlast the people who fought over them. That's not a small thing. That's almost everything.